Joining us now is Richard Johnson, a lecturer in US politics at Lancaster University. Richard, it's not the first time that high-profile public, often political figures, have been targeted.
No, I mean, I thought it was very interesting. Bernie Sanders put out a tweet where he said that political violence is un-American. And I think, unfortunately, political violence has been part of American politics since the beginning, really. Famously, America had a vice president who shot dead a former Secretary of the Treasury. But throughout American history, in the 19th century and the 20th century, violence was used to intimidate political opponents, to depress turnout. It was often implicated with race. Since the Great Depression, 4 American presidents have been shot at, one of them fatally, one of them wounded. You've had people on the left of American politics, Bobby Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, all killed through political violence, but also people on the right. George Wallace was shot and paralyzed by a political opponent, and you had the Weather Underground, a revolutionary socialist group, bombed buildings in the 1970s. So violence, I think, unfortunately, is part and parcel of American politics.
Just looking in the last few minutes, President Trump has been tweeted where he's called on the media to clean up its act. I mean, this is what he says. A very big part of the anger we see today in our society is caused by the purposely false and inaccurate reporting of the mainstream media that I refer to as fake news. A lot of suggestions and a lot of criticism of President Trump today, although he's calling for the relationship between the media and politicians to be more of a cordial one. He is a man at the top, he is the leader, and there's a very much a tone that is coming from him.
That's right, and I think that it's not unreasonable to say that the president has been careless and irresponsible with his remarks. When he's said things like that Maxine Waters, the Democratic congresswoman, should watch out, and usually presidents in recent American history would at least attempt to rise above this sort of thing and wouldn't engage in these kinds of threats against their opponents. And I think that obviously the language the president is now using does strike one as hypocritical. On the other hand, Donald Trump's approach is never to apologize, and I think that we're not going to see him recant for his past comments, even ones he's made in the past couple of weeks about praising people who have used violence against reporters. I think that's his way of operating, and I think that his supporters are probably going to remain loyal to him in spite of all that.
Historically speaking, when you do get an event such as this, when high-profile politicians have been targeted, I mean, what response, should we expect from the political class?
Well, I mean, you're seeing right now a common condemnation of political violence, and I think that that's not terribly surprising. This is not something that has just emerged in the Trump presidency. I mean, in the Obama presidency, a Democratic congresswoman was shot in the head, Gabrielle Giffords. So, and both when Giffords was shot in the head, and more recently when the Republican Steve Scalise was shot and severely injured, but Republicans and Democrats on the elite level have condemned this violence. But on the mass level, there is more suspicion raised. I mean, I thought it was really interesting that the shock jock, Rush Limbaugh, was already questioning whether these had been sort of plants by the Democrats to try and elicit sympathy during the elections. And I think that just goes to the lack of trust which exists among the American people between people of different parties.
A lack of trust, and also the use of language. I mean, over here over the last few days, a lot of criticism regarding, what was said about the Prime Minister, the noose being tightened. Has the language towards politicians, or the language that politicians, has that changed over the years?
I think that there has been very coarse language that has been part of American politics, but maybe it's not been used so much by recent presidents. But certainly, during the Obama presidency, Many of the protesters against his administration used very coarse language. And if we go back into American history, it used to be uncommon for fights to break out on the floor of the House of Representatives. In past history, pistols have been drawn, members of Congress have been beaten up by walking sticks. There is a violence tradition, a tradition of violence in American politics, and I think that Americans, and American elites sometimes like to pretend that it's not there, but it is an enduring aspect of American political life, and I think that President Trump hasn't done anything to downplay that, and I'm sure that some people are taking confidence from some of the remarks he's made in recent months on, acting tough towards the opposition.
Richard, thank you.
Thank you.